Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be doing the 8.21 tier list. Sorry this is late. I was moving last week, and yeah, I just didn't have the internet for a week, so this is definitely coming in a bit on the late side, but I think as far as I can tell, the next patch is not coming out for another week and a half. I could be wrong about that, but I think 8.22 is not coming out until after the season ends, which I believe is on November the 13th. Is the end, and that'll be the start of the new season. That would make sense when they would do the preseason patch. Now, they haven't said that officially. I guess it could come out on the 6th, but it seems really weird to do all the crazy changes they're doing and call it a preseason patch when there's 1 week left, you know, before the season cuts off, before the reward cutoff. So, I think this should still be good for the next week and a half. I think it'll be a 3-week cycle, which is unusual, but makes sense here. Good night! Good night! Rory and my wife just walked out. She's tired. It's time for her to go to sleep probably, but we let her play in here for a little bit. Anyways, let's go ahead and get through here. So I think this will still be relevant. So, you know, as you kind of finish up the season, these are some things to think about here. If you are trying to climb, I think my how to try to overcome hard stuck video is pretty helpful there. And as always, I like to say this is intended for a plat-minus audience. I think a lot of this stuff would still be good in low diamond. But it's going to be kind of a different meta once you start talking about Challenger and then definitely into the pro scene. There's a lot of different things that go on there in terms of skill cap, metagaming, all that kind of stuff. So it's for most people, you know, for the 98% of people that aren't Diamond, then I think this will be useful. It's also intended for non-specialists with moderate practice, so I will still put some high skill cap champs up there, but that is definitely something that I take into consideration is how easy is it just to pick up the champion and get some results with a reasonable amount of gameplay, right? You put 20 or 30 games on a champion, you can do pretty well, right? So that's something to keep in mind. And then I'll also look at potential power over popularity and stats. I don't always try to be, you know, a hipster and find like secret picks, although right now I think my #1 pick of Nautilus is something that's not very popular right now. A lot of people are sleeping on him big time. But in general, I just try to think of what's effective, what's actually going to work, and then think about it reasonably, logically. And we look at some stats, but remember that stats are always backward-looking, and they can overlook some things that can potentially be pretty powerful. So, let's go ahead and get started. All right. So I had Nautilus in Tier 3 in the last patch, and I've been playing him more recently, and I think he definitely needs to be Tier 1. I currently have him as the best pick, so I think he's the best blind pick right now. I don't think there are a lot of things that are phenomenal into him. Something like Morgana is obviously going to be pretty good, but he matches up very well against Thresh. He matches up pretty well against Leona. He's a very strong champion right now. So let's go ahead and open this up and take a look at why. So I've got his abilities here. So what's up with Nautilus? Why is like right now the time to break him out? We saw him some in the group stage of Worlds. He was getting picked occasionally, but basically a lot of the competition, a lot of things that have been good against Nautilus have been nerfed over time. So in general, what you'll see with a lot of the top picks are champions that can engage, start fights, particularly champions that are on the tanky side are going to be really good right now with support. So one of the main reasons for that is that tanks and other roles are pretty bad right now in general. Like, tank top laners aren't that great. Tank junglers aren't that great right now. Can you win with something like a Psy on top? Sure, you can. But I think by and large, the best types of champions in almost every lane are carry, you know, high damage type of champs. Right, and so having someone as a support who can start a fight, who can be that front line, is at a premium right now, particularly after they nerfed a lot of the enchanters in 8.12. And then they ended up nerfing a lot of the tanks in the other roles. That has helped out tank supports quite a bit. Engage tank supports. I think they've nerfed Braum and Tom a lot, so I don't think they're that fantastic right now. But anything that can start the fight is going to be good. And I think Nautilus is one of the best champions at that for a few different reasons. #1, his hook has a huge hitbox. It has a nice range. I think that Thresh's hook is also around 1100, but it has no delay on it. So Thresh's hook, he has that little half-second wind-up time, and then it has a more slender hitbox. But Nautilus, he has no delay. He just throws it straight out, almost like a Blitz hook, and it has a huge width on it, on the hitbox. Not only does it have a large range, but it also has, you know, that large sort of horizontal aspect to it too. So it's very easy to hit. as far as hooks go. So that's really helpful. And it drags people toward... It's basically a 1-second stun when you land the hook. And then usually you can get an auto attack in there too, which is going to stun for a minimum of 0.5. So it's a 1.5 second, stun route almost every time you do it. So that's the thing, is he has a really nice hook. And then they have, over the last year or so, they've reduced the mana cost if you hook terrain, and they reduced the cooldown by 50%. And this doesn't seem like a lot, but it's actually a pretty big deal. It helps you get around the map really quickly, especially when you're returning to lane early. And it has a fixed low mana cost of 60. So that means you can just kind of zip around the lane or just zip up and down the river just by hooking walls. And it doesn't seem like that, once again, would make a huge difference, but it actually can. You can get to lane a few seconds faster. You could rotate to mid lane a few seconds faster if you use that hook properly. So that's helpful. One downside of the hook is that it doesn't go over walls, right? Because you hook onto walls, therefore it doesn't go through them. So yes, you can't hook people over walls as much as you can with something like a Thresh or a Blitzcrank or whatever. But that situation doesn't... I mean, it's helpful. Like, Blitzcrank obviously is good. Blitz has the best hook. You hook people over a wall. It's very heavy damage. It's really quick, has a nice hitbox. The problem with that is Blitz has nothing else going for him. Like, that's it. Pretty much. It's that hit the hook or you're worthless. Whereas Thresh, if you hook it over a wall, it's like you're not going to be able to pull him over the wall most of the time. Same thing with Pyke. If they're standing right on the wall, Pyke can potentially pull him over the wall, but you have to go over yourself. And sometimes that's really dicey to try to do that as Thresh. Like, yes, you can Lantern and pull somebody with you, but... So what I'm trying to say is I think it's definitely a loss that you can't hook people over walls with Nautilus, but it's not as big of a deal as maybe I had thought it was in the past, just because you can get yourself into some really bad situations. You can bait yourself by trying to go over that wall with Thresh without proper vision in the area and things like that. So it is good to be able to go over walls, but I think that having basically an instant cast, like really fast hook that has a huge hitbox more than compensates for the fact that it can't go over walls. Okay, they also, more recent buff they gave to him was they lowered the cooldown on the shield. Now, they did lower the effectiveness a little bit, but having a 12-second cooldown instead of an 18-second cooldown, which is what it was, is super helpful. And it's a pretty decent little shield. Like, it does give some extra damage. Not a huge deal. But the shield is pretty nice. It's 100 shield plus 9% of your max health. So, usually that's going to be at least like a 280 shield if you have 2,000 health. So... I think that's pretty good. He also has pretty high base stats, by and large. He's got a mana pool of 400, which is relatively high. I think that's like Thresh has 300 something. I know that Pyke has kind of a large mana pool too. But he's got a decent mana pool. He's got 8.5 health regen, which is really nice for a lot of tanks out there, tank supports. And he still has the 576 health, which is becoming increasingly rare because they've nerfed the health on Tom, they nerfed the health on Braum, and they nerfed the health on Alistar. So all of these champs are getting their health pools hit. He isn't. That's good. And then he has a pretty good chunk of armor to go with it. Fairly low move speed, right? The 325 is the lowest you can get. But by and large, pretty nice base stats. So that's handy. And then Riptide. Now, this is one of the things that really sets him apart from the other tanks, is he has very, very good wave clear for a support tank. You can push in a tower, get priority, go get Dragon, go fight for Scuttle, go help your jungler invade. You can push really fast with Riptide. You get a kill, put the minions in their tower. It's something that's super underappreciated in solo queue, or like your team just doesn't get it. They don't want to push a lane. They just want to run straight to Dragon or something. You can actually just hang out in mid lane for a second or two longer, cast a couple of Riptides, clear that wave, and then go fight at the Dragon. So you actually have the ability to wave clear really quick and efficiently for a support, especially a tank support, without sacrificing any of your other important tools. It's just Riptide. It's going to be off cooldown soon. Right, whereas someone like Zyra can wave clear pretty well with her E, but the problem is you're going to be very vulnerable whenever you do that, because you're not going to have a lot of CDR, and your main form of CC is going to be down for about 10 seconds after the little bit of CDR you do have. So that's a real problem. Like, it's very dangerous to try to wave clear. Thresh can flay and do some damage to minions, but it's not the same. It's not even close. So being able to do that is very nice. Great wave clear. Pretty good damage. Total damage here, total single target damage when you get this maxed out at rank 9 is 350 damage AoE to anyone that's close within like every 5 seconds. Like that's quite a bit of extra damage, and it has a 50% slow. So yeah, it's really good. You know, does quite a bit of damage. AOE, slows people, great wave clear, awesome ability. That's really the one of the big things that sets him apart from other tanks is that ability to wave clear. So very, very handy. And then depth charge. They did buff this recently too. I think it used to be on 140-second cooldown. They dropped 20 seconds off of it, which is a huge deal. This ability is amazing. It's really good. It's point click, which is awesome against mobility champs. So you've got that Ezreal or you've got that Lucian or just whatever, pretty much any champion these days that has so many dashes. You know, they can maybe dodge your hook or, you know, with a lot of other hard engaged champs, they could get away from you in some way. They're not getting away from depth charge most of the time, right? So you press this on somebody, 825 range is pretty good. It's going to hit them. Even if they flash, even if they dash, whatever, it's going to get them. Unless they have some kind of untargetable mechanic, right? So unless they have Hourglass or like a Lissandra ult or, you know, she ults herself or something like that. Very limited things to get away from this. And it's a lot of CC, right? When you knock somebody up at level 11, it's a 1.5 second stun duration, and it knocks them up for 1 second. So that's a 2.5 second stun. And then you can hook them. That's another second. That's 3.5 seconds. And then you auto attack them. You know, that's going to be another second if we're looking at level 11 once again. So that's 4.5 seconds off of a point click ability on a stun. 4.5 seconds. That's like a Morgana bind and a half. Like, it's a ridiculous CC chain if you land all of this on people. And you're not going to miss your hook once they get knocked up with this. If you have a clear line of sight to them, if minions aren't in the way, even if minions are in the way, you have 2.5 seconds to walk around the minions, then hit them with the hook. So, very, very strong. And not only is it single target, it knocks up anybody. Anyone who's in the way is going to be knocked up for 1 second, and they're also stunned. So it does a little bit less damage, although it still does decent damage to people. I mean, it's 325 base damage at level 11, which is really good, but it knocks up everybody. So if you cast it on that back line AD carry, right, you cast it on the Kai'Sa on the back line, it's going to knock up her entire front line too. It's going to hit anybody that's in the way. So it's a super strong ultimate ability. So I think that makes him very powerful, and this is what sets him apart from Thresh as well, is he has that huge amount of CC. Like, yeah, Thresh can flay somebody. It's going to slow him for a little bit, right? His ultimate can apply a small slow, but that's nothing compared to Nautilus, right? The only thing that Thresh has that really CCs people for any, like, reasonable amount of time is the hook. So I think that all of these together, like the only person who has more like abilities that have stuns is like Leona, and she doesn't have more. She has roughly the same, but his stuns are longer. You know, her ultimate stun I think is for like 1 second. It might be 1.5 if you hit them with the very middle of her ultimate, but his is 2.5. You know, at level 11, and then like her Q will stun you for 1 second, whereas you know his hook plus an auto attack is going to stun you for 2 seconds. And you can auto-attack a bunch of different people, so you can spread this stun around to everybody. And it's on a fairly low cooldown, too. Level 11, it's on a 7-second cooldown. So it's just great. Great AoE damage, decent repeatable shield, great point-click CC, huge hitbox on a hook, great itemization. He's great with Zeke's because it's a short cooldown ult, and it holds people still. And you want to stay in combat and keep auto-attacking people because you do a little bit of extra damage. You're getting the stun on people. You're going to be able to hold them close with Riptide. That's exactly what you want with Zeke's. You keep them close, so you deal that area of effect extra damage off of Zeke's, and you hold them still so your AD carry can beat them down. And I haven't done this a lot, but there might be some situations I can envision where, you know, you could even go something like Font of Life and then get Ardent Censer on him. That sounds ridiculous, but you have an AoE slow with Riptide, right? And so you can slow their entire team, and if anyone on your team auto-attacks anybody that's been slowed that has that Font of Life debuff on them, they're going to get the Ardent Censer stacks. If you don't know that trick, I've explained it in a past video. Basically, Font of Life, anyone that hits the person gets healed, that counts as a heal from you, it triggers Ardent Censer. Okay, and he has decent AP ratios. I mean, it's a 0.8 on his ult, the 0.6 on his E that's a repeatable, you know, slow, 0.75 on his Q, so he does decent AP damage. The only problem with that is, of course, you're going to be a lot squishier if you do that. So I don't know if I'd necessarily recommend that, but if for some reason they have a lot of tanks, maybe it's an option if they have low damage on their team. Most people aren't running tanks these days, but it's on the table. It's weird I wouldn't do it all the time, but it is on the table. But he's good with just a traditional Zeke's plus Knight's Vow as well. So, very strong champion. And then you just want to go kind of your standard Aftershock, Bone Plating, Chrysalis. And then I've changed this a little bit. Yeah, I don't like Unflinching. I like Revitalize more. That'll just make your shield a little bit bigger, which is helpful. Unflinching just feels so bad. I don't know. I mean, I guess you could go Unflinching. And definitely would not go Mobility Boots. I've changed my mind on that. I think, like, just a defensive boot. Like, you could go for something like Ionians if you're feeling really frisky, but, you know, you're going to be on the front line. You're going to be getting hit. So Ninja Tabby is really helpful for that. Because you don't need the mobility boots to get close to them, right? You already have your ult. It's a point click. You have a huge long-range hook. You know, you shouldn't need mobility boots. Like, mobility boots are good on champions. You just want to run at people and just hit that one ability, you know, to engage, like an Alistar or a Blitz, and they really don't want long fights. Whereas Nautilus is pretty, like, that he's in his element when it's a long fight, right? When you're just sticking in there, auto-attacking people, spamming your E. You know, that's helpful. Let me open the door real quick. The cat's freaking out. Cat wants in here. Okay, so come on in. I just didn't want Rory to come running in here. What is it, Sadie? She says, what's going on in here? Why are you hiding? So yeah, I think Nautilus is great. I don't think he has that many bad matchups right now. He's just so useful. Like, he has so much CC, he has great itemization. He's really good into Thresh specifically, and Thresh is very popular right now. The reason he's good into Thresh, by the way, is he just has more CC than Thresh. He's tankier than Thresh. His engage is easier than Thresh. And his itemization is better than Thresh because he uses Zeke's better, he uses Knight's Vow better, and those are both of the items that Thresh is going to get anyways. So the only advantage Thresh would have is Thresh is going to be a little bit better at peeling. So Thresh might be able to peel you, but it's really hard to peel Nautilus. Like, you can't do anything about that missile, right? If I just, you know, Flay's not going to stop the missile from hitting the AD carry, right? You could maybe flay the hook, but you have to be, like, really on point because it stuns you when it goes in. So if you hook Thresh, unlike Leona's root, it drags the enemy towards him. So you can't just flay out of that. I don't think. It's a lot harder. The timing window is much smaller than it is on Leona. So, Sadie? I think that makes him a really good matchup into Thresh. And then, for the similar reasons, he's good into Leona. He's good into a lot of stuff. So, great champion right now. If you haven't ever tried him and you want to give him a whirl near the end of the season here, I think it's very helpful. Okay, Rakan is another person that I think is super strong right now. Obviously, he's seeing a lot of pro play. A lot of the tier lists that I've seen don't have him as high. And, you know, if you're just strictly looking at, like, sort of the rating of something like Lulu Analytics and you're looking at win rates and stuff, he's not going to look that impressive, right? He's clocking in at about 49.5%. Now, he was a bit lower than that before. I think last patch he was 48%. But he's amazing. I mean, Rakan is the best engage in the game. I think, like, it's just such a swift, quick engage, just R plus W, very little reaction time, and you can stun a lot of different people. You have a lot of flexibility in how you want to interact with that. And so, very useful, and he's really mobile. That's the thing, is you can get out of so many situations. You can dodge hooks really well with him, with his W. And his engage range is so far. Like, if you think of if he double shields to catch up to people to get into a fight, you can close 1200 range max off your jumps, because you jump once for 600, jump again for 600, and then you can, you know, R plus W, which is another 650, right? So without flash, you have like an 1850 effective engage range, if the circumstances permit that, which is, you know, unlikely you're going to get 2 bounces, but it's not uncommon to get 1 bounce to jump onto somebody who's on that front line for 600, and then do another 650 with your W, that's 1250 engage range, and you don't really have to hit hooks or anything. It's just straight up like you're on top of them. You're not going to miss it most of the time. Similar to a Nautilus. It's not as guaranteed as Nautilus, but it is better against things like Hourglass because they have less time to react. So it depends on the situation, but I still think that makes Rakan very strong. He also, of course, has a shield, which scales really well. He has some healing in the lane phase. So I think it's pretty good. Now, I have gone back to Unsealed Spellbook. I was trying out Guardian for a while, but Unsealed is just so good on him. Like, everything in this tree is good. Like, Biscuits give you extra sustain in lane, you know. The Unsealed itself is really nice because you can start fights, and so you can use those summoners constantly, right? Because it's going to be like a, 130-second base cooldown, and you get CDR really, really fast on Rakan with your itemization. And so, you know, you can get to 35% really quickly on the CDR. And then, because the more times you can start fights with Spellbook, the better. Because then you're not going to be sitting on summoner spells. Like, that's the problem with Spellbook, is if you just sit there and, like, you swap your summoner over to Exhaust or something, but then you don't ever use Exhaust for, like, 2 minutes, you're really wasting the potential. But because Rakan can start fights reliably over and over and over again, you can, you know, switch to Exhaust, use it, switch to Heal, use it, switch to Barrier, use it. Even switch to something like Cleanse and use it. Like, he uses almost everything really well. And, you know, being able to leverage that is helpful. He's also one of the best Zeke's users in the game, right? Because he has a short cooldown ult. He can, you know, hold people still, go in for the fight. Now, he's not quite as good as Rakan with Zeke's, just because Rakan actually wants to stay in there and he'll do that extra damage that Zeke's can do. But he is very, very helpful with it. Now, one thing is he can more comfortably get something like Ardent Sensor as well, which I've been getting more and more recently. So especially with someone like a Kaisa or a Twitch or just some other like really high scaling AD carry who uses Ardent Sensor really well, if you get Zeke's plus Ardent, that is a massive amount of extra power on your AD carry. So I think that he can use that very comfortably, very powerfully, because he has really good ratios on his shield. So having the extra AP and the extra shield power is fantastic, and it gives him move speed. I mean, it's a great item. The problem is that you're going to be a little squishy with that build, so you have to be careful. But Zeke's does give you a little bit more tankiness. So just something to keep in mind. But you can take things like Barrier and Exhaust and Cleanse to kind of help you out in those situations if you go Unsealed. Then you can still get Bone Plating and Chrysalis, which is great. The new rune, I'm not going to talk about it a lot in this video. I'll have a whole video about all the preseason stuff. But that new rune looks like it's going to be ridiculous on him. That gives the extra, like, resistances and auto attack damage whenever someone gets shielded. I mean, with Rakan's shield, where you can shield him twice, and stacking that with something like Zeke's or Ardent Sensors is going to be absurd. I think they're going to have to either nerf that rune or nerf Rakan, based on what I've seen. And I hope they don't nerf Rakan. He is seeing a lot of pro play. I personally don't think he's overpowered. Like, when I'm playing against Rakan, I'm not thinking, like, man, this champion's really, like, oppressive. You know, I think if I get beat by a Rakan, then I'm thinking, man, that guy actually played pretty well, you know? So I don't feel like he's oppressive. I feel like there are a lot of counters to him that are very popular right now. I think that things like Thresh, things like Nautilus is a nightmare for Rakan because you can't get away, you know, from that missile a lot of times. And so now Nautilus isn't super popular, but he's on the table. I obviously think he's a really good pick in this meta. You know, Morgana, and then weird picks like Veigar and Poppy and stuff like that sometimes show up. So I think there's a good amount of counterplay to him because he's mobile, but if you catch him, you could kill him. So I think Rakan's pretty balanced right now. I think he's strong if you're good with him. But I think there are answers, so I really hope they don't nerf him. They've nerfed him enough, you know, but we'll see. That rune's going to be real sketch on it. It's going to be extremely good. So, and then I think you can go, you know, usually you want to go Ionian, Nomads, Zeke's as fast as possible. This will give you 35% CDR with Cosmic Insight. And then after that, you can kind of feel it out, whatever you need. You can go Redemption on him also. You can go Knight's Vow. There's a lot of different options, but I do think that Rakan's super strong right now. Okay, and then Thresh. Thresh is also really good. I mean, a lot of lists are going to have Thresh at number 1. What is Thresh's win rate right now? It's pretty high, right? It's like 52. That's pretty high for Thresh. So, I don't know if it's going to show us everything I need to see here, but Thresh is really strong because he's had several buffs and they've nerfed champions that are good against him. So one buff that a lot of people just have been sleeping on who haven't really watched this channel or other channels, and, you know, I don't hear a lot of people talk about this very much. You know, I watch, like, LOL Analytics and, I don't remember what day. I watch a bunch of different tier lists, and, oh, is she sad?
She's Dada.
Oh, no.
Dada.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get to hang out all tomorrow. It'll be fine.
That's right.
Is they gave him a lot of extra shielding on this, right? So, or they didn't give him extra shielding, but they lowered the cooldown on it quite a lot. You know, now we're talking, it goes all the way down to 12 seconds, which is huge. Not only does it give you and this is a big shield, don't mistake it. Like, in the mid game, when you max this out second, you're going to easily have, you know, about 60 to 80 souls. And so it's going to be pretty close to a 300 shield for 2 people, right? It's you and another person if they take it. And it basically gives them a free flash. So it lets them get out of a lot of situations. And, yeah, lowering the cooldown on that by, like, I think it was 4 seconds. It used to go to 16 seconds. Now it goes to 12. Is a very big deal. And then they also lowered the cooldown on the hook early on, too. It used to be 20 seconds. Now it's 16. So it's a very big deal. They lowered the cooldown on 2 of his biggest things, which is great. And then they've nerfed things like Tom and Braum, who are both very good against Thresh. And so now he's a strong champ. Right now he, you know, having said that, he is very difficult to play. He's the hardest champ, support champ in the game to play. The reason is not only is he sort of mechanically intensive, right? You have to be able to hit the hook, which has a delay on it. You know, a half a second delay, so it's basically like you're playing with, you know, 500 ping. Whenever you try to throw this hook out, it's very predictable. Like, yeah, you can look the other way and try to fake them out, but people have a lot of time to react to this. And the width is really slender. So it's a pretty difficult ability to hit if you don't have a lot of practice with it. And then also you have Flay, which you wouldn't think this is a really hard ability. It is a hard ability to use. It is deceptively difficult. Because if you mouse even slightly off, then you're going to miss it. Because you want to, usually you want to throw it over your shoulder in an opposite direction, which is weird to begin with. But you want to pull people towards you a lot of the times when you're doing this. So if you flash and you try to flay them and you do it in the wrong direction, that looks terrible. Right? It's one of the only abilities where you'll see pros, if you watch them carefully, they will have something to where if you like hold it down, it'll show you the hitbox on it. That's one of the only things you'll ever see a hitbox that a pro uses is for Thresh's Flay. You'll see that little, like, you know, blue icon on either side of it because they want to see that they're not going to send him the wrong way. So even though these people like Afromoo and other people have, you know, probably played Thresh 3,000 times, they still want to see the hitbox on it because it's that hard to use this ability correctly a lot of the time. So it's a very powerful ability. You know, you can displace people forward. You also have to have really fast reaction time with this a lot of times. So depending on the ability, you can stop a lot of mobility, right? If Jarvan's trying to flag and drag onto your AD carry, you can knock him backward. If Leona's trying to go in, you can knock him backward. You know, Zach's trying to go in, you can knock him backward. So there are a lot of options for how to use this, but it's pretty mechanically intensive. It's deceptively challenging to use correctly, consistently, in all the different situations where you could use it. And that kind of gets to the last point here, is there are so many different ways you can play Thresh and react to situations. You have so many tools in your toolkit that it's very difficult to make decisions. So he's a difficult mechanical champion, but he's also a difficult decision champion because your abilities can be used in so many different ways, right? You can lantern people forward, so you can engage in a fight with your hook and then, you know, pull your team into them, or you can use it defensively to pull people out whenever you go in. With Flay, you know, are you going to use it to just try to knock somebody forward to slow them, or are you going to hold on to the Flay and wait for that mobility move? Are you going to wait for that Kha'Zix or Rengar to try to jump on your AD carry in order to flay him, or the Camille, right? So when do you use it? Do you hold on to it? Do you use it in a different, you know, when? When are you going to use this ability? And so, like, there's a lot of things there. You hit him with the hook. Are you going to take it? Are you confident that you're going to be able to win that fight, or do you have to wait? Because you have to put yourself in danger if you take it. Unlike a Blitz hook, where you pull them completely out of position, you're kind of putting yourself out of position a little bit, you know, with Thresh. And there is no reverse gear. If you get caught out, you're dead. Like, you can save other people, but you don't really have a lot of tools to save yourself. It's not like Rakan, who can, you know, jump back out to somebody. And so that makes him really tough. And he has terrible base stats. His base stats are awful early on in the game, right? Like, he has okay health, right? 560 is okay. But his armor is only 28. This is like Janna level armor. Just extremely low. Most tanks have like 40 something at the start. And so he has extremely low armor. His magic resist scaling is terrible. Most tanks go up to like 52 magic resist or something like that. So his base stats are awful, and he has pretty low base attack damage. His attack speed is really low. So his stats are awful. And the reason that they have that is because he gets extra armor over time from his souls. But you'll notice he doesn't get any extra armor per level. So what this ends up meaning is like someone like Nautilus, who's going to end up with like, you know, 90 armor or something like that, just normally, as of scaling, Thresh has to get something like 80 souls just to break even with him. Like, not even to get a bonus, just to get what all the other tanks get for free. So it feels cool when you're getting souls. You're like, yeah, I'm getting more powerful, I'm getting souls. It's like, no, you're just catching up to what everyone else gets for free who doesn't have to risk, you know, being out of position in order to go grab souls. So, like, it is a cool mechanic. It does feel, it feels interesting, but if you really think about it statistically, it puts him at a major disadvantage, especially early on in the game. So that's kind of bad. And they took the AP scaling out of Lantern. This used to scale off of AP, now it scales off of souls, which I guess effectively is kind of the same thing in that scenario as far as the passive goes. But anyways, he has a lot of tools. He's very powerful. He has had some really, really strong buffs lately, like Death Sentence, like Dark Passage, and a lot of his key counters have been nerfed. And he's pretty good against most things right now in this meta. So he is a very strong champion. I just have him at number 3 just because I think he's harder to use than either Nautilus or Rakan. And he just takes a lot of practice, and I just think he's a riskier pick. But overall, I still think he's really good. If you have a ton of practice on him, or if this was like a challenger level tier list, yeah, he'd probably be number 1 right now for solo queue. But for just normal people that are plat minus, that maybe don't have a lot of experience on him, he can be really good, but he's an investment. So I don't know if you want to play him, if you're trying to climb the last couple of weeks. If you're already like gold 5, 0 OP, and you're cool with that, and you just want to try out some different stuff, sure, go for him. He's going to be a champion that's always good, right? Like in any meta, pretty much, like if you're good on Thresh, it's viable, right? Like I would be shocked if they completely nerfed him out of the meta. He's good in most situations. Okay, let's move on. Let's start doing this quicker. I didn't want this to take forever, but I know it's been a couple of weeks, so I'm trying to catch everyone up to speed. Alistar, still going to be a strong champ, has really high base stats. Now, they did just nerf his health on this patch, so that is relevant. It seems like, wow, with this ISP, it seems like this page is loading up every time now. I wonder if it was just my old ISP, because before I had a problem with like these pages not loading, but I didn't change anything about my computer. I just changed my ISP when I moved to a new internet service provider, when I moved to a new house. But anyways, he's still going to be pretty good, right? He still has 563 base health, which is higher than anyone else that we've seen. It's crazy. He had like 620 at level 1. Not like bonus armor. So he has 44. Thresh has 28. So like just in like financial terms, he has 16 more armor here at level 1, and that's something like 320 extra gold worth of value. So it's pretty much like he starts off with a free kill in the lane, Alistar, when he's versus Thresh. He starts off 1-0. If you want to think about it that way, like that's how much the difference is in base stats. A little bit faster, better scaling. Look, he scales up to 130 also. Thresh has no scaling. So really high base stats, 8.5 health regen, which seems ludicrously high for a champion that also has a self-heal. So his stats are great. And then, of course, everybody knows how Alistar works, right? The combo. The thing about him is, like, it's pretty much like a Rakan ult, but it's on a, once you get some CDR, it's going to be on, like, a 10-second cooldown. Once you get some points in these things and a little bit of CDR. So, it's a Rakan ult that's on a 10-second cooldown. Now, the difference there, though, is he can't get out. So, once he goes in, he's not escaping. And that's pretty much all he can do. There's a couple other things he can do. But for the most part, he just has really high stats. He can ult. He's very difficult to kill, and he can just start a fight whenever, which is part of why he's so popular in pro play. But, if you have a really good AD carry and they're going to follow up and fight early on, you can just start those fights whenever you want and be really powerful. Now, it does only stun for 1 second effectively because it's just a 1 second knockup with nothing else. So the problem is you have to use both abilities for only 1 second of CC. Like Rakan is at least going to stun him for 1.5 seconds. And Rakan can run around and charm other people, and he can escape, and he has scaling with the shields. He has a lot of other stuff that he can do. But Alistar is tanky. He's probably not going to die in a team fight unless you're horribly losing the fight anyways. That is powerful. Trample is interesting. You can get that extra 1 second stun, but with how much mobility is in the game right now, a lot of times they're going to be able to get away before you get the stun off. But it is very nice if you can get it. And then, you know, the real huge benefit of Alistar, and this is another reason why he's very good in Challenger and Pro play, is once he hits level 6, he can basically just face tank turrets for 7 seconds. I mean, he could probably eat, like, at least, I don't know, 8 to 10 tower shots because of this damage reduction. And just his high base stats. So that just really allows you to dive the tower with your jungler early on and just get a free double kill pretty much. So Alistar, very strong champion in organized play, pretty good in solo queue. Once again, the problem though is you have to have good coordination with your team and you have to play to his strengths. If your team's not following up or if you don't get ahead early, he does get outscaled because he just has no scaling. Pretty much. Like, he doesn't have any shields, he doesn't have any heals, he doesn't have as much CC, or not as much reliable CC as something like a Nautilus or a Leona, and so, or even a Thresh. Like, he doesn't have as much utility as Thresh. He's all in, right? And if you go all in, you lose the fight, you're going to die a lot of times. So, he's good. He's good. I just think he falls off a little bit at Platinum and lower, but he's still going to be a strong champion. What's his win rate? He's at about 50%, so he's pretty legit. Okay, Lulu. Now, this is another TSP special here, and once again, I'm not trying to be, like, edgy or controversial or whatever and just put, like, a weird pick as, like, tier 1. But I think that Lulu is probably the most undervalued champion. It's either her or Nautilus right now. Like, no one talks about this champion. This champ is really, really strong with a lot of the popular picks out there. Like, she's insane with Kai'Sa and, like, Twitch. Anything that has a lot of auto attacks and scales really hard, Lulu's going to be very good. And I'm not even sure what I think a big part of it is people just don't know the perfect build on Lulu because she's an odd duck. She's not like the other enchanters. There's a couple of distinct differences about her. Number one, she doesn't have a heal. So that's part of it, is that she has a much harder time trading in lane than something like a Nami or a Sona because she doesn't get a free kind of get out of jail free card, for terrible phrasing there. Because she doesn't have that heal. And she had a really bad matchup against Nami, but right now Nami's not being picked as much. Nami's still popular to an extent. I guess she's still picked a decent amount, 12%, but I think she was closer to 20% before the most recent nerfs. And so she had a really bad matchup into Nami, but Nami got nerfed, and Nami's getting picked less. And Sona's not getting picked as much, although Sona still has a high win rate. Sona has the highest win rate of popular supports. Those champs just aren't getting picked as much. You're seeing a lot more of kind of the Thresh, Blitzcrank, Alistar, Pyke, that type of stuff. She's okay into those. So she's all right in the laning phase. You know, she's not amazing, but she's okay. I wouldn't necessarily pick her with a high pressure laner, you know, someone like a Draven or a Jen. I think you'd be better off picking something with more kill threat, but she's all right. Some of the oddities about her, though, is she doesn't scale very well with plus healing and shielding. She's okay, and she doesn't scale very well with AP. So that puts her in an odd spot itemization-wise. You know, this barely has any scaling with AP. Her shield only has a 0.6. That's if you're shielding with it. If you're doing damage with it, it's only a 0.4. And it's only a 0.5 on her ult. So those are really, really low AP numbers. And so that means, like, getting items with a lot of AP aren't super amazing on her, right? Also, the shielding only affects her E. Fun fact, if you didn't know that, it does not affect this bonus health because this is not a heal, this is an infusion of health. I know that sounds weird, but there's a difference there in terms of how it's coded. So this is not affected by Ignite, you're always going to get the full amount, but at the same time, it's also not affected by Redemption. So you're never going to get more than this off of plus healing and shielding. You do off of AP, but not plus healing and shielding. So that kind of puts her in a strange place, itemization-wise, from where a lot of the other enchanters are. But a few of her big things are she has huge steroids, for like some of the best steroids, especially after they've nerfed Janna so much. She has some of the best steroids in the game for the AD carry because she gives out a ton of attack speed, the 45% attack speed, and she gives them a lot of movement speed so that they can kite people better, and her passive hands out a ton of damage early on. So, I mean, just looking at this, like level 11, that's 75 on-hit damage with a 0.15 ratio, so it's not like an insane amount, but if you have 100 AP, which is like Ardent Censored plus like runes, you'll get close to that, probably. You know, then you're going to end up with something like 90 on-hit damage off of picks. 90. Every time they auto-attack. That is a lot of extra damage. A lot. I mean, champions like the old Ardent Sensor that everyone was saying was like super overpowered and busted used to give like 25 on hit damage. Varus, whose auto attacks look like they do a ton of damage, with his on hit only does like 24 on hit damage. This is doing 90 on hit damage. So very, very strong steroid is for someone who's going to be getting a lot of attack speed, the Kaisas, the Twitches, the things like that. Now, I don't believe that Ginsu's procs this twice, and I know this doesn't apply to Hurricane Bolts, so keep that in mind. There's not going to be, you know, like ridiculously insane interactions with that. However, the faster attack speed off of this does, you know, interact with Hurricane Bolts. That does interact with Ginsu's, so I think that's really nice. So she has a huge steroid, big buff, decent harass, not amazing, but okay in lane in some matchups with like EQ combo. And then a point-click ult, which is insane. It's only on 110-second cooldown, level 1. Gives a huge amount of health, knocks somebody up for almost a second, 0.75, and slows for a long time. And because it's not a heal, it's an infusion of health, you can use this early. If you need to use it for the CC, you can do that, and you can't overheal people, in other words. Like, they're going to get the health. They can go over their maximum health if you do that. Now, they'll lose it after 7 seconds if they don't take any more damage, but that's rare. So, I think that all this makes her really strong with certain hyper carries. Now, the question is then, which runes do you take on her? And I think there are a lot of different options. The traditional is going to be your Airy, Mana Flow Band. I'm going to change this too, because I've tried to, I don't know. Like, I'm not entirely sure of the exact thing, but this is what I've been using the last couple of days. Okay, so the thing is, like, I think that the sorcery tree's been nerfed a lot and just feels pretty bad on most champions, honestly. Like, Celerity is not that great. It's been nerfed a ton. You can use Absolute Focus. Scorch has been nerfed a ton. Not amazing anymore. In fact, not even really good anymore. She doesn't scale well with AP, so Gathering Storm's not going to do a lot there. It helps, but you're going to be a lot weaker in the early game. Mana Flow Band's okay, but if you're not spamming your skills early, then you don't really have a ton of mana problems later on. You know, this is only 65 mana to do this, and like your shield is kind of expensive, but usually mana is not like a huge deal with her. And you're going to be getting mana items, right? You're going to be getting Ardent Sensor, maybe Zeke's, which we'll talk about here in a second. So, you know, that's unnecessary. Now, Airy is good, but it has been nerfed. The damage early on has been nerfed. The 80 shield later on is great, but it's like, do you want to go down that entire tree just for Airy? Right? Because if you go down that tree, then you're going to have to get Bone Plating and Chrysalis, because that's just kind of mandatory right now, until they nerf this stuff in the preseason. So that means you can't get Footwear and Cosmic, you can't get Revitalize, and so, you know, a lot of it is because you're going to have these two no matter what. So the question is Airy and those other 3 bad runes, basically, is it worth picking Guardian over Airy if in exchange you get 3 upgrades on your other runes? Because all 3 of these are better than the 3 other options, I'm pretty sure. Mana Flow is like, okay. Mana Flow might be equivalent to maybe Revitalize in there, but like these 2 are so good. They're so good on her. And so I'm thinking this might be worth it. Now, one issue to keep in mind is if you go Ardent Sensor, then your W by itself is not going to trigger Ardent Sensor. You're going to have to put the shield on the person to get it. So that's kind of annoying. Whereas if you have Airy and you put the W on somebody, Airy's going to jump to them. That counts as a shield, and that would trigger Ardent Sensor. So it's okay. But this does give you some extra survivability. It does give you a lot of extra health. You're losing the AP, but you're trading the AP for like flat health early on, which is a good bargain because her AP ratios are not amazing. And so this gives you extra survivability and lets you get a really good sort of bargain here, which is going to allow you to get to 2 items faster, because this is like a 350 gold value. The footwear, you get 300 gold for boots, you get extra 10 movement speed, about 50 gold value, and then Cosmic's going to give you the extra, you know, CDR on a lot of stuff. And so I think that's very nice. So it's going to save you, you know, 300 gold having to buy boots, and that's going to allow you to get your Ardent Sensor faster and get your Ionian boots faster. So I think she's very good. I mean, the bottom line is I think she's good if you have a hyperscaling champ. If you have something like a Twitch, you know, or a Kaisa in particular. Those are the two that are really huge with it, but maybe even like a Vayne or something like that, it can definitely be a pretty good pick in the right circumstances. So I think she's great. She's also really good against assassins, obviously, you know, because you can ult, knock them up, and then press your W, and just, they can't do anything, you know, for like 2.5 seconds if you want to do that. So that polymorph is a good way to combat things like Zed, like LeBlanc, you know, just a lot of really pesky champions out there. The point-click CC that's so long, it's like about as long as a Malzahar ult, is pretty good. Okay, and then we'll move a bit faster here. Jeez, it's taking forever, but I just wanted to catch everyone up to speed. So Pyke, I have down a little bit. He's still pretty good. I mean, he's got like a 50% win rate here. I can't remember if they nerfed him or not, but like the bottom line is I just think that either Thresh or like Nautilus are just going to be better than Pyke right now. Like Pyke is handy because he can get that execute damage, and you can build him tanky. He does have the extra sustain in lane, which is really nice, but you do have to charge up your Q, so it kind of has like a Thresh-itis there, where it takes a little while to throw that Q. It gives people a lot of notice. And you can still get blown up, like even if you're a little bit tanky, if you go in there for that stun, and they CC you, then they're probably still going to be able to kill you before you can get out with your Duskwater dive, with your W. So his trading patterns are just inherently a lot more risky than Thresh, and probably even Nautilus. Like, Nautilus is just a lot tankier than him with his shield, and Nautilus just has a lot more guaranteed CC than Pyke does. So, Pyke is pretty good if you get ahead and you snowball, and he's a lot of fun, and I think that he can be effective, but I just feel like, yeah, I'd rather have some of these other champs first. Now, Pyke is pretty much, I think, going to get gutted next patch. They are buffing his AD, like, how he scales with lethality, but they're trying to nerf tank Pyke quite a lot. I'll go over that in a separate video, but for right now, near the end of the season, he's still okay. You can still win with him. I think that, like I said, Nautilus or Thresh is probably a little bit better, but, you know, Pyke's still doable. You can still win with him. Okay, so Nami's down a little bit, but she's still a good champ. I mean, statistically, she's still at, like, 52%. Losing that self-heal feels pretty bad, or, like, having less of a heal feels pretty bad, but you know, you still have a lot of harassment early on. You still have pretty good scaling. It's good with a champ that you think is going to lose lane pretty hard. You can kind of heal through it. You know, like a Twitch or a Vayne or maybe even a Kaisa in some situations. You can't heal through it as much as you used to, but you can still make it work. The only problem with Nami is she is very susceptible to very high damage mobile champions, which there's a lot of that flying around out there right now. You know, she's going to be susceptible to things like Camille, to things like Talon, Echo, LeBlanc. All of this stuff is going to be very rough. And she can't really start fights that well. You know, like, yeah, you can use your wave and maybe hit some people with it and try to start a fight. And maybe you hit a bubble on somebody. It's just, it's a lot harder to start a fight with her than other champs. And her itemization got nerfed pretty hard from patch 8.12. So, she's okay. She can still be good. You know, she's serviceable. She's still strong. I just feel like I just want someone who can engage fights more now. It's preferably someone who's kind of on the tanky side, or at least can help your team become more tanky, kind of like Lulu. Just because you aren't going to have tanks in top lane and jungle most of the time. And so having someone that can fill that role is handy. Like, Nami's going to be a lot better in a meta where you have top lane tanks, or at least jungle tanks. But she'll still be pretty good. One final thing that I meant to mention about Lulu, so sorry for going out of order here just a little bit. I think that Zeke's is something that's really underexplored, and I've tried it, and I think that can be really good on her once again, because you're not missing out a lot by not getting plus healing and shielding and AP because you don't scale that well with it. It does give you some extra survivability, but most importantly, it gives a lot of extra on-hit damage to your AD carry. So it kind of doubles down on extra damage, because you have a really low cooldown ult that can hold people still with that slow, right? And so that's going to allow your AD carry to get that buff and start packing down a lot of extra damage. So I think that that's a pretty good potential item on her. And if you have the Ardent plus Zeke's, that's a really good combo, because Ardent's going to give you that extra attack speed. Lulu also gives extra attack speed off her W, and so you're going to be able to get in more auto attacks and get in that extra damage off of the Zeke's. So I think that has a lot of synergy. If you think about W plus Ardent Sensor plus Zeke's plus your Pyke's damage That adds up really, really quickly for champions that are going to be auto-attacking a lot. So I think that's another thing that potentially makes her really strong that people haven't really thought about too much. I had thought about taking Unsealed Spellbook on her, and I've tried that, but right now you're a bit too squishy. But when they nerf, they take Bone Plating out of the game, and when they nerf Chrysalis to make it really bad in the preseason, which is what they're doing, I think we might be able to revisit Unsealed Spellbook on her. I think that could be a legit item on her, but we'll see. You know, I'll do a separate video on that. But I do think that Zeke's right now is pretty good, and I think that Guardian is probably the place to be. But, you know, there's always going to be an argument for going AoE. It just gives you more harassment early. It gives you more flexibility with Ardent Sensor later on, but the other stuff in Sorcery is so bad right now that I don't know. I think there's definitely an argument for Guardian right now. Okay, Blitzcrank. Blitz is good. I mean, if you're good on Blitz, you land that hook a lot, he can definitely be up to tier 1. The problem is, like, that's all he does. You know, like, if you hit the hook, it's great. If you miss the hook, you're completely worthless. So I'd rather just play something like a Thresh or a Nautilus where it's like, okay, I'm throwing hooks. If I miss it, I can still do other stuff. If I'm Nautilus, I still have my auto attacks to stun. I still have my ultimate that can CC a ton of people. I still have my E that does a lot of damage. If I'm Thresh, you know, I've still got Flay. I've still got Lantern. I've still got my ult. Blitz, it's like, I mean, you got a little bit of movement speed with your W. You got a very small knock-up with your E. It's like melee range. You've got your ultimate, which does pretty good damage, like base damage with very little scaling. As far as like items that Blitz usually gets, I think it has a huge AP ratio on it, but you're not going to get AP on Blitz most of the time. So I don't know. He's just too one-dimensional for my taste. But if you're really good at that one dimension, if you hit those hooks a lot, and you know, one advantage of Blitz that we've talked about in terms of his hook is that it's very fast, it has a huge hitbox, and it can go through walls. It's the only one that does that, right? So like Pyke has a delay, Thresh has a delay, Nautilus can't go through walls. Blitz is the only one that does all three of those things. It costs a ton of mana. It's like 100 mana level 1, so you're like out of mana after 2 Blitz hooks. So they really want to punish you hard for missing those hooks, just because if you hit it, it's so powerful. And he does like the most burst damage off of his hooks. Like personal damage. He does a shocking amount of damage at level 6. If he hits that hook and knocks you up with his E, and then ults you, it's probably something in the neighborhood of like 600 damage, just by himself, not including the 80 carry or the ignite that's going to be on you. So, you know, he does a lot of damage early game. So he's like the super snowball support if you hit those hooks. So I think that he can be quite strong. Okay, next one here that I want to talk about. So Blitz, he's good. If you hit the hooks a lot, you're a smurf or something, or you just really want to get good, then you can run him. Keep in mind, he's going to be banned a lot in like bronze level play, bronze, silver. He's still banned 8% of the time in platinum, but he gets banned a lot in bronze and silver because people just don't want to deal with him, and it's just so easy to hook people in those elos because they just don't dodge very well a lot of times. So he can be good, but I'd have another hook champion's backup like Nautilus just in case he gets banned. Okay, and then Fiddlesticks is going to be my number 1 AP support here. This is something that a lot of people have forgotten about. When he was getting paired with Heimerdinger a while back, he was a pretty popular support. But I still think that he's good. His E did get nerfed, and Aerie did get nerfed, which is very good on him, and Scorch got nerfed. So yeah, a lot of stuff that was really good with his harassment got nerfed. But he's more than just his harass. Like, his harass is nice, but he's got a lot of things going for him. So I usually only pick Fiddle if my team picks all AD right now, just because, like I mentioned, having a tank or at least someone who can reliably start a fight is at a huge premium right now. Now, Fiddle can start fights, which is great. But you have to have very good vision control to make that happen. You just can't ult right in front of people. I mean, you can sometimes, but a lot of times that's questionable. at least at like platinum, probably even gold level, people will like be watching you. If they see Fiddlesticks, they're gonna run. You know, they don't want to start a fight if Fiddle's just sitting there waiting to ult. But he has a lot of stuff going, so the harass is still strong. You know, it still pushes waves. It'll still give you wave priority if you want. Adds in some free harassment. Now, the fact that Lucian is really popular right now and Vayne's pretty popular, a lot of these champions that are going to have healing. I mean, even Kai'Sa's probably going to take Fleet Footwork and maybe Doran's Shield against him. They're going to be able to heal through a lot of the harassment early, so that kind of sucks. but you can at least push the wave. It still has a silence in a team fight. That AoE silence is brutal. Terrify is ridiculous. It's a point-click stun, pretty much. It's a fear for 2.25 seconds. So it's about the same as Lulu and her polymorph. The difference is they can't like choose where they're moving. With polymorph, they can still run around in polymorph form. But similar concept, shorter range. But nevertheless, very, very strong. So if they have, 2 or 3 high damage melee champs, they've got something like a Jax, Kha'Zix, Rengar, Zed. A lot of these champions, he just completely wrecks them. LeBlanc, to an extent, if they get close to him, with that kind of CC, people are going to kill him. So he basically forces people to get Quicksilver Sash. And if they don't, which a lot of people at Platinum and lower won't get Quicksilver Sash, then he's very good. If they do, it's kind of a problem, but at least you made him spend 1,300 gold on an item to try to deal with you. And then, of course, you have his ult. It's on a pretty low cooldown. Actually, it's not that low. It's kind of like an average-ish kind of cooldown. Maybe they increased that. I think they decreased it at later ranks is what they did. I think it used to go like 140, 120, 100, something like that. So they took off a little bit of CD on extra ranks, but... Anyways, his ult obviously does a ton of damage. If someone sits in the full ult at level 11, it's like 1,100 base damage. So even if you don't have a lot of AP, it's still strong. And you can start fights with it, 800 engage range, pretty much. So he's good. He's just a good, solid pick. He gives you quite a bit of AP damage. So if you have like 4 AD on your team, it's enough to where they might have to respect you if you get a couple of kills. And he has a good backup plan of just like pretty good like engage and CC. Even if, you aren't doing a ton of damage. If they have a lot of tanks or something, you're still useful. So he's okay. The problem is he doesn't have a good way to check bushes. Like none of his abilities can look in bushes. And so you just have to go up and kind of like face check or just like ward check bushes. And that's super dangerous. He has no escapes. He's very slow. He's squishy. So if you fall behind, you get caught out. Like, that's the worst because you have to have really good vision control to make Fiddlesticks work. And if you're behind, you're just not going to be able to get that vision because it's super dangerous. Whereas, like, if you're something like Rakan and you're a little behind, you can still probably get, like, respectable vision, right? You can go sweep their vision. You can go into some moderately dangerous areas with Rakan and try to ward. Because if anyone comes at you, you can just, W and get away. Like, jump over a wall or something. But, like, with Fiddle, you're not getting away. You're going to die, probably. I mean, you can fear him and try to run away, but it's a lot sketchier. So he's still pretty good, but I probably would only take him if your team really needs some AP. Okay, Zyra's another one. If you're gold and lower, Zyra's probably tier 1, maybe higher in tier 2, but she gets a lot better the lower the elo goes because people won't be able to dodge your roots. The problem is it's a very slender hitbox and a very slow-moving projectile, so with champions like Lucian, even like Kai'Sa, Ezreal, a lot of the popular AD carries are going to be able to jump out of their way. But the buff to Leandri's does help her out a lot. She does way more damage. And she has really good harassment in lane. Now, once again, kind of like with Fiddlesticks, people are going to be able to take like Fleet Footwork, Doran's Shield, and a lot of people are going to be getting an early Vamp Scepter these days. And so, they can probably heal through some of your harass at a certain point. But you have a lot of all-in damage too. So she's one of the only popular champs that has really reliable, strong harass early and all-in kill potential early. So like Nami can kill people all-in early, but she doesn't, like, you're going to have significant help from your AD carry most of the time. Whereas with Zyra, you can kill them by yourself a lot of the times, especially when you hit 6. So she's one of the best kind of do-it-yourself supports. She's kind of the queen of bushes. If someone tries to walk into a bush and you're standing there, you can blow them up. And she has really good vision control. So you can use these plants. Remember, the plant range is 850. I think warding range is like 450. So she can use her plants about twice as far as you could place a normal ward. And this is very helpful because you can put that plant in a bush or put the seed in a bush. And then if you spawn a plant, the plant gives huge vision. It's like 800 vision or something. It's a lot. It's at least what a ward is, and I think it might even be further. And it sees through pink wards. That's the key thing. So, like, a control ward normally shuts out vision, so if you put a normal ward in there, then it goes black after a second or so, right? but the bush or the plant stays up, so it can give you vision to not only clear like that ward that's in the bush, but to help you see everything else around there. Because one of the most dangerous things, and you know this, like anyone who's played support any length of time is going to know this, is when someone has a control ward in a bush, especially that tri-bush in bot lane, and you want to go up there and try to clear it. You put a green ward in there. You're like, oh, nobody's in the bush. Okay, I'm going to go clear this. You walk up, auto-attack it a couple of times, and then the jungler jumps out of somewhere and kills you, right? Well, with Zyra, you can see the situation a lot better. Also, when you're trying to move your ward line forward, so like maybe you're trying to ward the river bush, but where you really want to ward is, you know, on the other side of that wall, right? So you just need vision in the river just to make sure you're not going to get killed, and then you want to use your ward a little bit into the enemy jungle. Now you don't have to waste a ward doing that, right? Now you can just put a plant there, you see it's clear, then you can move forward and save your wards to put them in more forward positions. And so it's really intricate stuff like that that a lot of novice Zyra players don't think about, which is, you know, just how powerful her vision control is with those plants. That's also why I max W second. Sometimes people ask, well, why do you do that? Why wouldn't you max Q? The reason is it's a lot of vision control, and most of your damage comes from these plants. If you don't have plants up, then you're just not doing any damage. And so having more plants, having more vision control, oftentimes is going to be more powerful than doing a bit more damage with your Qs. Although there are some situations where getting the Qs is a little bit better, especially since they like changed it to where when you get an assist, you get an extra seed or something. Yeah, whenever you get a kill or an assist, then you get a free plant. So that makes it a little more like viable to try to go for Q, like Q max in team fights. But I still like the W. But there's an argument for both. You definitely want to max E first, but you know, getting some points in Q or W, the order that you do that, it's debatable. So I think she's really good. You know, I have her a little bit below Fiddle just because there's a lot of mobility. Stuff can blow you up these days. You know, Lucian can dodge your plants and then blow you up, or Zed or LeBlanc can just run at you and dodge your E. Because it's so predictable what Zyra's going to do. When you're running at her, she's going to throw her E. It's going to be really slow. Sometimes people flash it. Sometimes people just sidestep it. So, you know, if they see you, it's really hard to hit that. Like, you have to hit them out of bushes, or they have to just not be paying attention, right? It has to be a big team fight, and there's a lot going on, and they just aren't watching you. Whereas Fiddlesticks is just point-click fear. Okay, they're CC'd. You know, that you can't dodge that. Like, you can Quicksilver Sash it, but you're not going to dodge it. So I think that's part of what makes Fiddlesticks a little bit more consistent. Although I think Zyra is better in the laning phase. It's just like once you're out wandering around in the world, you know, I feel like Fiddle just has a little bit more utility and consistency than Zyra. But Zyra is still very, very strong. So if you want an AP champ, especially if you are gold and lower, Zyra is one of the biggest heavy-hitting AP champs around. Now, some people like Brand. I have Brand under honorable mentions. I just like Zyra more just because the vision control you get from plants, and I think that she just performs better in smaller groups. So if it's just like a 2-on-2 or a 1-on-1, I think Zyra's just going to do a lot more damage. Now with Brand, if people are all clumped together and grouped together, I think he can be really good. He has more uptime on his spells, but I feel like he just doesn't have as much utility as Zyra does, but you can still win with Brands too. Then finally, tier 3, and then we'll call it a day. What is it, Sadie? Sadie says, feed me, obviously. Sadie just always wants food, don't you? Leona's pretty good. I mean, some people might have her higher up on the list. The problem is, like, I just feel like Nautilus and Thresh are just better. And I think that Thresh specifically is really good into Leona, and Thresh is very popular right now. He's by far the most popular support, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, he gets picked in 29% of games, which is ludicrous. I mean, the second most picked champ is probably, looks like it's Pyke, which is at 13%. So he's picked more than twice the second place. So he's ludicrously good. So if you don't have a good matchup into Thresh, or you don't at least have an even matchup into Thresh, it's a problem right now in this meta. And Leona has a terrible matchup. This is like the worst matchup just about. It's like Thresh and Morgana are like the two things you do not want to see if you're playing Leona. And the reason for that is if the Thresh is competent at all, whenever Leona tries to E in, he's just going to flare out of it. And then you can't do anything else. If you try to, you know, ult somebody and you don't hit him precisely in the middle, he can throw the lantern and get him out of there after you've slowed him. So, like, you can win as Leona versus Thresh, but he's going to make your life really hard if he's a decent Thresh player. So that's part of why she's down here. She just has a terrible matchup into, you know, the most popular support right now. And then she doesn't really have great matchups into Alistar either. Like, she's pretty good against things like Nami. And, you know, she's decent into things like Zyra and Fiddle if you can get on them. And if they don't poke you down. But it's pretty bad into a lot of the... Like, she's good into Nami, who's kind of popular right now. She's good into Rakan, who's fairly popular right now. So she's got some good matchups. It's just, it's rough. And then also, like, you're going down. Like, if the fight goes south, you're going to lose. It's kind of like Alistar. But I think that her, like, engage is a lot, is less reliable than Alistar's. Alistar just point-click, WQ, boom. You know, there's a fight. Whereas with Leona, you have to hit that slender little E on them, and they have a bit more time to interact with you. So, like, Thresh can flay Alistar out of his headbutt combo, but that's really, really fast. Like, you kind of have to flay before he even starts that, you know, in order to get it off in time. So, you know, Leona can be good. She's fun. She does have a short cooldown ult, which is really nice for Zeke's. So you can go around, you know, and just spam your ult on people and start fights with Zeke's. She's very, very good in a 2-on-2. She does a lot of damage. But if you fall behind, it can feel really bad because whenever you go in, you're not getting out. She doesn't have any extra mobility. She is kind of tanky, which is nice. I mean, 90 seconds is really good. Really good cooldown on that ult. But she's okay. I would just rather play Nautilus or Thresh most of the time. But if you're good on Leona, if you can make it work, if you get a lead early, she's great. I mean, obviously with something like a Draven, maybe a Lucian, something that can really bust people up and get ahead early, especially if you have a good jungle dominance. So if your jungler picks like Lee Sin and their jungler picks like Master Yi, and you know you're going to have a lot more power in the jungle, and you're going to get kind of an isolated 2-on-2 or a 3-on-2 bot lane, then she's good. But if they have lane dominance, or if they have a dominant jungler, if they have the Lee Sin, and you have the Master Yi, and you know that Lee's potentially going to camp you, that's bad. She does not deal with camps very well. She does not deal with being behind very well. She wants to be in charge. She wants to be dominating the lane. Also, if they have good wave management, it's really hard to make use of her because unlike other hooks, she has to go 100% go into them. And so if they just freeze the wave outside their tower and they just farm there, so if they know what they're doing and your AD carry she doesn't have much wave clear, right? Like all she has is her W. I mean, you can use your E to kind of wave clear, but not really. So you can't really push them into their tower that well. So if they are able to just kind of freeze outside of their tower, you can't do anything. Like it's so hard to dive them early. Yeah, she gets some extra armor from her W, but it's not an Alistar ult. So you can still definitely die trying to do tower dives. So if they just freeze outside their tower and they just manage to sort of, you know, manage the wave better than your AD carry, then you're just going to be sitting there watching them, you know, for a long time because you can't do anything. Whereas someone like Blitz or Thresh can hook people, you know, out of that tower, right? Or at least CC him for a little bit to, like, have your AD carry do some damage to him. But Leona can't do anything to him where she risks dying to go in there. So that's kind of rough. But, you know, she can still be very good if you're good on her. Okay, Sona kind of rounding out the bunch here. Sona, she's still pretty good. I mean, she has pretty bad matchups into hard engage, though. She's probably the strongest high-scaling enchanter right now in terms of, you know, if she gets Ardent Censer, Athene's Redemption, she's going to be, like, unstoppable in team fights. You know, if the fight lasts longer than 5 seconds, if she gets off, like, 2 Ws, then you just win the fight, pretty much. It's just too much healing and shielding. But the problem is you have to get to that point. And so she does have nice CC with her ult, which is good. She can do quite a bit of poke damage in the lane, but if you're staring down a Nautilus or a Thresh or an Alistar or even a Rakan post level 6, that's a very scary world to be in. Or a Pyke, Blitzcrank. Like, a lot of these champions, she does not want to see this. You know, like, she wouldn't mind seeing Lulu. But, you know, this other stuff, you really don't want to have to deal with that. And these champions are all very, very powerful right now. It's like, yeah, you can beat Thresh. I mean, Thresh is almost always a skill matchup. Like, he doesn't completely shatter most champs, except for maybe Leona, if you're decent. But, like, most of the time, it's a skill matchup. Like, he's going to get poked down. He has low base stats. But at the same time, if he hits that hook, whoever he hooks is probably going to die. So, you just kind of play him with fire, though. If he ever lands a hook on you, you're gone. Probably. And it's going to take a lot to poke him down. So, I don't know. I wouldn't want to... If I had to play that matchup, if someone's like, hey, one side's going to have Thresh, one side's going to have Sona, you know, which one would you want to play? I would want to play the Thresh side of that matchup, but, you know, Sona can make it work. You just have to, like, not die, get your harass where you can, position well, and just hope that your team has a really good team fight. The problem is there aren't a lot of team fight comps right now. Everyone just plays, like, hard carry skirmishing comps. You know, you see a lot of, like, split push. You see the Victor... Camille, Jax, Irelia, like these champions that want to go to side lanes and split push and farm. There aren't, because most team fight comps hinge around tanks. And that's another reason why she's fairly weak right now, is there aren't a lot of tanks. You know, if you have an Ornn and a Sejuani on your team and they're going to hold people still and tank them and just CC people, your shield is really good because they're going to have a lot of resistances and you're just going to be able to keep healing them. But if it's like, you know, everyone's just playing these like hardcore high-scaling assassin type of champions and everyone dies instantly, then there's no point in, like, trying to get off these heals, right? You know, if their LeBlanc just comes in and 100 to 0s your 80 carry, like, your shield's not going to do a lot about that. So, you know, she can start fights with her ult. It's just a lot harder. So she's okay, and she's really squishy, kind of like I was talking about with Zyra. She doesn't have a lot of escape. She's squishy. You know, and you have no way to check bushes. None of your abilities can check bushes. So you just have to walk up and ward them, and that's very scary, you know, in a meta where there's just so many high mobility, like high damage champs running around. Then I don't know, you can make it work, but I would be scared most of the time. Now Morgana is very good against a lot of these champions. I don't know, maybe I'm just being a little bit biased. I personally, like, am not a huge fan of playing her. She's okay, but, like, one of the big problems is just, it feels like it shouldn't be that hard to start a fight because you can just queue. I mean, maybe I'm not giving her a really fair show here because, like, she is very good against Nautilus, Rakan, Thresh, like, all of these champs. She's good, but they nerfed her wave clear a little bit. You know, she is a champion that can go for something like Ardent Sensor plus Zeke's and be pretty effective as well. She's got a 50% win rate. But just some of her numbers have been nerfed. You know, her W is nerfed. I think they nerfed her shield a little bit. So she can be effective. It just feels like, you know, her W is completely worthless and her ult's not that great. It's okay. Black Shield and the Bind are both very good, but I feel like she's just a little bit less reliable. Now, if you have a really fed assassin, she's great. Or just like a really fed hypercarry. You have a Kai'Sa that's 7-0 and you put the Black Shield on him. I mean, that's amazing. But there's a lot of AD damage running around too, which is like, it's just so much damage. It doesn't matter if you crowd control them or not. So if they have like a, you know, a really fed Yasuo or a really fed Talon or something like that Black Shield doesn't block any of that damage. Really fed Irelia or Jax or something. So I don't know. She's okay. I mean, maybe she should be tier 2 because she is such a great counter to other champs. I just feel like you're just too much of the, like, at the mercy of the rest of your team. But I mean, it's kind of that way with a lot of supports. But I don't know. She's okay. I usually just ban her because I don't want to deal with her. But at the same time, I kind of don't want to play her. So it's just kind of a weird situation, but she's okay. I mean, you can still win games with her. Janna's another one. I don't really like playing Janna right now because I guess maybe I'm just biased because I'm used to what she was at one point where she was really strong. And I haven't played her a ton recently, so maybe I need to give her another try. But she does have a hard matchup into things like Thresh, all these hook champions. They can kill people pretty easily. It's kind of rough. And, you know, your shield got nerfed a lot. Ardent Sensor got nerfed. Redemption got nerfed. Like, all this stuff got nerfed. And she personally got nerfed, like, numerous times in the last year. So she's probably my most played champ of all time, certainly over the last couple of years. And, you know, historically, I'm somewhere close to, like, a 54, 55% win rate Janna. When I played her this season, I'm only, like, 47%, which is gross. I mean, obviously, people are still winning on her. She's 52%, so maybe I'm just not playing her right. Just like not getting the right items. I guess that's possible, but I don't know. She just feels kind of bad right now. She's been nerfed a lot. You know, if you want a peel champion, I'd rather just probably play Thresh, but she can be pretty good if you think you're going to get to 3 items and you just really want to peel your Jinx or your Twitch or whatever, then she can still work. Okay, Braum. It's one of the last ones that I'll mention here. Let me just crack this window a little bit because it is hot in here. Wow, what are those bugs doing? How are those things getting in? I don't know, but I gotta crack it because it's getting kind of hot in here. But he's okay. You know, he got nerfed. Like, his base stats got nerfed. Like, he's pretty good against something like a Twitch. He is very good with Lucian, and Lucian is probably the best AD carry overall right now. So, Braum does have stuff going for him. You know, he's okay with Zeke's. He's okay with, you know, Knight's Vow. Like, one of the main issues, though, is just, like, he has a hard time starting fights. Like, yeah, you can flash ult and maybe make that work, but... I don't know. It just feels like it's not the meta for him. Like, I feel like you want more mobility. You want more more engaged potential out of your tanks. I mean, he's still sitting at like 50%, so it's not like he's unplayable. But I've never personally been super strong on Braum, but even I don't see Braum as much, and even when I do, I feel like he's not as high at impact. Sometimes he is. Sometimes, especially with Lucian, but he's okay. I mean, you can win with him, but I just think there are better options a lot of the time right now. Okay, and then, yeah, that's it. So as far as honorable mentions, I mentioned Brand. He's okay. I just think Zyra is a little bit better at doing what he does. Soraka, you know, you can win with her. She's one of the hardest hit champions by the Enchanter nerfs, and a big part of that is because she has to get things like Mikhail's and Redemption and all of that, because she scales so well with extra plus healing and shielding that you just really price into getting those items. But she just doesn't have a lot of CC, and she doesn't have a lot of mobility. So that's really rough in this meta. And she functions best in a tank meta, kind of like Sona, where you want champions that have a lot of resistances, so your heal gives you a lot more effective HP. Because if you heal somebody, let's say you heal somebody for 200, and they have no armor, then that's going to block 200 physical damage, or it's going to mitigate 200 physical damage, right? Because you get them 200 health. But if they have 100 armor, then that's going to mitigate 400 physical damage, because they're going to have to deal 400 damage to you. It's going to be reduced by 50% for 100 armor. Then that will take off the 200 health that you healed them. If they have 200 armor, then and you heal them for 200, then it's going to take 600 damage to cut through that. So that's the issue, is that, like, the more armor and the more magic resist people on your team have, the more effective your heals become. But because nobody's playing tanks, everybody's playing carry in every role, then your heals aren't as effective. And there's also just a ton of... Because the enemy team's not playing tanks either, then they're going to have a lot more damage, they're going to have a lot of mobility, and those are the kinds of things that end up killing Soraka. So, she's okay, you can win with her, but I think a lot of those things make her problematic. Shin's another one who's okay. I mean, you're seeing him some in pro play. Like, he's really good with coordinated teams where you can ult on top of somebody. He just gets poked out early. Like, flash taunt is okay. You know, you can taunt over walls to get away from people. You know, being able to block auto attacks with his Spirit Refuge is really strong. If your AD carry stands on top of it, you know, against something like a Master Yi or some other, like, heavy auto attacking champion, that can be really helpful, but I just think he's a little too situational for most people. Requires a bit too much coordination. Same thing with Tahm Kench. Like, you can save people with your W, which is really nice. You can rotate around the map with your R, but you have to be able to get your team to actually, like, use these things to not spit themselves out back to their death, which happens all the time when you play Tahm Kench, or to, like, actually use your ultimate. Like, you know, there have been games where I've been sitting there, like, calling for the jungler, hey, come bottom, I have ult, we kill them, they don't have flash, and he won't come down there for, like, 3 minutes. So it just requires a lot of coordination. You see him a lot in pro play because he enables a 1-3-1 playstyle, like split pushing, because if he's in the middle, he can rotate to side lanes really easily to pick people off. So he's really good at defending against split pushing, and he's really good with split pushing. So that's the main reason that he's picked. And he also counter-engages a lot of hard engaged champs like Alistar, like Thresh, and those are both very popular in pro play. So that's why he's getting played in pro play, because they maximize his abilities. You know, people on pro teams aren't going to spit themselves back out to die when he saves them. They are going to use his ultimate. But that's harder to set up in solo queue. And then Bard's okay. He does good early game damage. He has some okay utility. I just think, like, his short range, and he's just very conditional. Like, you have to have a wall or a minion or just something close by to, like, get the Q stun off. Magical Journey, you know, you have to be using that correctly. Like, he's okay. He's okay. I just think that there are better options out there. Karma, not that great right now, but they are thinking about nerfing her next patch. If she does get a 1.4 second root, then she might be a lot more relevant. But right now, I just think she gets outshined by a lot of other champs. But she's still like, you can win with her. I just think Lulu's better in pretty much every way. But, you know, if you just really like Karma, you can make it happen. Tarek is okay. It's just they nerfed him a lot in the mid-season. Like, they took away like 50 damage off of his E. They added like 20 seconds to his ultimate. You know, they nerfed Tear of the Goddess, which he was rushing pretty early on. And they nerfed Redemption, which he usually gets. They just nerfed a lot of stuff that he has. And, you know, once again, he's best in a heavy team fight tank meta, where he can spam his heal a lot, where people aren't going to die instantly so that his ult actually goes off. And where he can just, sit there and spam those heals. Whereas right now, no one's grouping up, everyone's running around, Clown Fiesta style, like, just trying to skirmish and kill people. So, if the enemy team's fed, which they almost always are, and they kill somebody, they kill your AD carry in, like, 1 second or less, then you're not going to have time to react with your ult, because they're just going to be dead. And so, that's the issue. I think he's still viable in certain types of metas, just not this one. It needs to be more of a teamfight, tank-oriented meta, and you'd probably see him more. Zillion's okay. I mean, I just think they're better champs. There's not a lot to say there. If you're really good on Zillion, you can make it work if you hit the double bombs. I just feel like a lot of the other supports does what he wants to do better. Veigar is gimmicky. You know, if they have a lot of mobility champs and you feel like you can get him in the cage, like he's pretty good against Rakan or someone like a Lucian, then that can be powerful. But if they take cleanse or they get a Quicksilver Sash and they can get away from your stun in some ways, then you don't really have much else. It's really rough. But I guess he can be okay in some circumstances. And then Vel'Koz, I probably wouldn't play him, but he does have some interesting matchups against things like Braum and Zyra. He's pretty good against other AP champs. Once again, he works better in a tank meta where you can just hang out in the back, your front line's going to protect you, then you can use your ultimate to cut through their tanks with your true damage. So he's a pretty good in like a tank-on-tank meta, but right now it's kind of rough for him. Okay, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Sadie, what are you doing? She's trying to jump up there, but she couldn't find a good spot to hide. Here, I'll pull a chair over for you in a second, Sadie. Okay, but anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Remember, if you enjoy the content, be sure to like and subscribe. It does help other people find the channel. Come check out the stream. I'm back pretty much every night around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to make one final push for Diamond at the end of the season. We were Platinum 1 early on in the season. Obviously, we've been Diamond in the past, so we'll make another good show of it, see if we can get up there, just try to stay focused up. But come out, join us. It's a fun, cool community. It's a good time. And, yeah, that's going to be it. Have a good day. I'll see you next time.